Wel, bore da, a diolch i chi gyd am ymuno â ni ar gyfer y sesiwn awr hon. Anbyg ond ydw i ac rwy'n gweithio ar raglen y Coedwig Genedlaethol. Rydym yn mynd i glywed gan fy nghydweithwyr Davies, pennaeth y raglen Coedwig Genedlaethol, a James Byatt, pennaeth polisi Coedwig Genedlaethol. Good morning. Thank you all for joining us today for this hour-long session. I'm Anne Burgoyne and I work on the National Forest Programme. We're going to hear from my colleagues Erica Dawson-Davies, Head of National Forest Programme, and James Byatt, Head of National Forest Policy. Defnyddiwch y bar sgwrsio I ofyn cwestiynau yn Gymraeg neu yn Saesneg ynglŷn â chyllid y grant neu'r Coedwig Genedlaethol ei hun. Please use the chat bar for asking questions about the grant and also about the National Forest Programme. Rwan, dyma Ceri Wichard, dirpwy gyfarwyddwr tirweddau, natur a choedwigaeth. Here's Ceri Wichard, Deputy Director for Landscapes, Nature and Forestry. Ceri.
Diolch, Anne. Bore da pawb a chroeso. As Anne said, I'm Ceri Wichard, the Deputy Director for Landscapes, Nature and Forestry Division here at Welsh Government, and I'm delighted to see so many of you on the call today. We've set up today's session for you to be able to hear about the new grant scheme and to ask any questions you may have. We're running in Teams today, and unfortunately Teams doesn't currently provide us with simultaneous translation, so I apologise it's not a fully bilingual event as we would like, but you may of course post your questions in either English or Welsh in the chat and we will do our best to answer them. So I'm just going to give you a little intro into this grant and how it fits into our programme before I hand over to my colleagues who know more about the detail and can answer your questions more fully. To deliver our Minister's ambitions on creating a national forest in Wales, we know we're going to require a sustained effort over many years with plenty of investment and lots of engagement of people across Wales from all areas, from the forestry industry to the general members of the public enjoying our woodlands. And the programme is about protecting and enhancing the quality of the great woodlands we have in Wales, as well as planting trees to create many more new woodland areas, both for people and for our nature. And this will help us to address the climate change emergency that we've all heard so much about, and also the more recently discussed biodiversity crisis that is facing Wales and indeed the world. Both very important areas for this current government. And I'm sure many of you will have seen that Lee Waters, our Deputy Minister for Climate Change, has recently completed a deep dive exercise into forestry in Wales. And this work has really helped us to identify some of the barriers to woodland creation in Wales, and more importantly, some actions we need to take to deliver woodland planting at scale to achieve the recommendations of the UK Climate Change Committee, whilst also being mindful of the link to biodiversity, avoiding priority habitats, and as well as providing all those other benefits that trees can provide to people and communities. So the grant we're talking about today is the Woodland Investment Grant, and this follows hot on the heels of our deep dive work and is part of our start on this journey, along with other schemes like Glacier Woodland Creation, which in the last few years have received very high levels of funding compared to past years. So the Woodland Investment Grant is really building on the National Forest demonstrator projects we ran last year, and we're making funding specifically available to help improve and create woodlands which have the potential to become part of the National Forest in Wales and add to that network that we're hoping to create right across the country. And the idea for this year is to test the scheme, to look to see if this is something people are interested in, if it works well, and then roll this forward and expand it, helping to create longer term certainty. We all know that woodland projects are long term. You can't create a woodland overnight, and we know that that longer term certainty of funding and investment will enable further projects, particularly those woodland creation projects, to come forward. So that's about it from me. I'll now hand over to Erica, who's going to say a bit about our plans for the National Forest, and then on to James, who will speak about the Woodland Investment Grant itself. So diolch, thank you, and over to you, Erica.
Bore da. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us all today. I can see, gosh, there's 113 people with us this morning already. So please post your questions in the chat bar as we go through the presentation. We'll try and answer as many as we can, and if we can't answer them now, we'll definitely be posting them later in an FAQ, which will get out to you as soon as possible. Okay, so starting off with the National Forest for Wales, it originally started in the manifesto commitment from the First Minister in 2018, and that was the first mention we had was 2018. So on 12th of March 2020, the First Minister officially launched the National Forest Programme at the Woodland Trust Brunei site down near Neath. And he described the ambition for the National Forest that it extends the length and breadth of Wales, and it can provide many opportunities by planting, growing and protecting trees, contributing to the decarbonisation goals and the climate change emergency, halting the decline of biodiversity, improve the health and well-being of our people, supporting commercial businesses and activity, such as timber production and recreation and tourism. And then this year, the National Forest now features in the programme for government for the new government, and it commits to creating the National Forest and harness its economic, cultural and recreational potential. So we've been working on the National Forest Programme, as you can see, since March 2020. So what is the National Forest? On a local level, it's woodlands for people, nature and commercial opportunities. It covers new and existing woodlands in urban and rural locations in public and private ownership. So it's not a defined geographic space. It can be, as long as it's an outcomes-based programme, which we'll go into a bit more detail in the next slide. On a regional level, it's spread across Wales. It's outcomes rather than geographic, as I've just said. So we're looking at a whole Wales approach, and on a national level, it's an umbrella and a catalyst for woodland creation and better management of existing woodlands. It's a very long-term programme, as you can imagine, with multi-level benefits and multi-generational outcomes, and we liken it to the Wales Coast Path for sort of attracting visitors to Wales, and for visitors in Wales also to enjoy sort of the Welsh landscape. So on a global level, it's a brand and it's an asset for Wales, and it's also a tourism destination, and it's also will help contribute to the carbon sink for Wales to help support reaching net zero emissions. So that's just a very quick overview of where we're up to. The outcomes we mentioned in the previous slide, we've developed 6 outcomes for the National Forest, and as I said, it's outcomes based. So it's a place-based approach, but as long as the woodlands meet these outcomes, and that's what we're aiming to, they can then apply to be part of the National Forest. So they're good quality, well-designed and managed resilient woodlands that are accessible to people, community involvement in those woodlands, and we're just working on the definitions of these, so you can have more information on just exactly what those outcomes mean. And then on the other side, we have another 3 outcomes which are desirable, which is connected woodlands, so connect to habitat, connect to active travelways, connect to other woodlands that are already there. So there's a connectivity element of the National Forest. They're dynamic and multi-purpose woodlands, so they have multi-purpose uses, so they could be production forests that also have a recreational element, things like that. And they're also woodlands that demonstrate learning, research and innovation. So it's looking at different ways of doing things and then sharing that knowledge with others. So there are 6 outcomes that we're using to guide the National Forest development at the moment. So moving on, last year, we launched 14 exemplar sites on the existing Welsh Government woodland estate, which are managed by Natural Resources Wales. And this is a map of those 14 woodlands from north to south. They've all been chosen because they demonstrate those outcomes in different ways. And they're just to exemplify and to show how those woodlands can look in years to come. These are all, as I say, part of the National Forest now, and they're our first 14, and we're hoping to add to these moving forward, specifically with this grant and then future funding rounds, and we'll build up that whole Wales approach to the National Forest. So that's it from me, I believe. I'm going to hand over to James now, who's going to talk in a bit more detail about the grant and about this particular window and a bit more about the National Forest in general. So I'd like to hand over to James now. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Hi, I'm James, Head of National Forest Policy, and as Erica says, I'm going to talk a bit more about the Woodland Investment Grant, so TWIG as we're calling it this morning. I've got a few slides that sort of summarise the guidance that we've attached and sort of set out some of the key points. As Kerry mentioned earlier, TWIG is our new demonstrator project for the National Forest. It's a pilot, and if it shows promise, then it's something we'd like to replicate in future years, learn lessons, build on it and develop it so that there's a bit more certainty about the kind of schemes we'll be running as part of the National Forest. We've tried to design it to be flexible. So TWIG is open to applications from landowners and those with full management control of public and private land. The idea is that it provides grants to enhance and expand existing woodlands and open up existing woodlands that maybe haven't got access at the moment, and create new woodlands in line with the UK forestry standard, which have the potential to become part of the National Forest in the future. This broadly means woodlands that are well managed, accessible to people, and give local communities the opportunity to get involved. And that's in its simplest sense, but as Eric has mentioned, there are 6 outcomes. So we've got 3 essential outcomes and we've got 3 desirable outcomes. So we want people to see people working towards those. So it may be that, you know, if you apply to TWIG this year, you might start to demonstrate some of those outcomes now, but it might take some woodlands might take that bit longer. So it may be that you need to come forward in future years to continue to build that woodland. But the idea is that in time, it meets the outcomes we're looking for and can potentially become part of the National Forest. If it's a woodland that will never meet the outcomes, such as it will always be a private woodland, it's not something we'd want to be funding through the National Forest work. But if in the future it could become a public woodland, then it would. Just as a final point on this slide, we've had a few inquiries from NRW colleagues that this scheme is specifically for woodlands beyond the Welsh Government Woodland Estate, because we've got other arrangements in place to enhance and improve those woodlands to become part of the National Forest in the future. So just in terms of the key messages that I wanted to sort of get across this morning, apologies for sort of reading some of these out, but I mean, the capital budget for this window is £2.5 million, plus we've got a small revenue budget of £250,000. You can apply for up to 10% of the total project costs in revenue funding, so hopefully that will help fund some of these projects. It's 100% funding available. The maximum grant is £250,000. The minimum is £10,000. We've had a few queries around the £10,000 limit, but that's what it is for this scheme. It may be something we'll look at in future rounds, but for the moment there's a minimum funding level of £10,000. I'll come back to this point a little bit, but timing is really tight this year. We appreciate that. I'll come back to on a later slide, but really we're looking at projects that have got the consents and permissions in place already if they're needed before applying to the scheme or are very, very close to being achieved. We opened for applications last week on the 14th of July. And it closes on the 27th of August 2021. So again, it's not a lot of time to get applications in. We will then assess applications in September with a view to awarding grants in October time. It partly depends on how many applications we get, but that's the rough timetable. And then work needs to be complete by the end of March next year, so 31st of March next year. The application's available via RPW online. And we've developed it with RPW colleagues, and it's a more sort of new streamlined form. So hopefully it's more user friendly and help you to make applications more easily. So as I mentioned, we appreciate we are working to very tight timescales this year, which is not ideal for some projects. And if you've had a chance to look at the guidance, we do acknowledge in the guidance that some projects won't be possible in the timeframes involved. But as we say, there's hope that this scheme will be repeated in future years. So if your project's not ready for this year, then should be more opportunities in the future to come forward. So really this year, we sort of grouped into 4 categories of projects. There's projects around better accessibility for people. So it could be you've got a woodland already that's a private woodland, but you could open it up to the public and putting in some of that sort of accessibility, or it could be improving existing footpaths or putting in signage to help people, you know, visit the woodland to get the most out of their visit, or helping to develop the woodland for nature's purposes, biodiversity purposes. It could be ready to go. I mean, a lot of these projects will need to be ready to go projects, particularly in terms of woodland creation, where you've already got your necessary, if you need plan permission or if you need environmental impact assessments, they've already been granted or very close to being granted. Small scale woodlands, which maybe don't need environmental consents, planning permission, but please, take note of the Welsh Government's Woodland Opportunities Map, just to make sure you're not going to be planting on areas like priority habitats, for example. There's an opportunity potentially to blend the TWIG funding with other grant schemes. So if you've got a Glasgow woodland creation project or a private investment project where it would help just to get a little bit more extra funding, perhaps to help with the public access elements, again, there's that opportunity there. And as I say, we're not expecting all projects to be possible this year. So if you do have a really nice project that could potentially be part of the National Forest in the future, we would like to hear from you. And we've listed the National Forest mailbox there, so feel free to get in contact with us, and we'd like to discuss that with you. And also, if there's things that we could do to the scheme differently in the future as well, if there's things that we could develop, then please let us know. Happy to discuss. Okay, so just in terms of what the scheme will fund, we've got a list there. I mean, things like obviously trees, shrubs and other plants, help with site preparation. I mean, some of the key stuff is going to be around constructing accessible pathways and nature trails, educational trails to get people involved in, help people get involved in the woodlands and to visit the woodlands, signage, interpretation boards, making space for nature, costs of labour associated with doing the work, things like benches and seating to make them more accessible to a wider range of people. We have said here that we're only funding tools and small scale equipment. This won't be a scheme where you can apply for medium and large scale equipment. There is the opportunity for land purchase, but it needs to be no more than 10% of the total project cost. Similarly, you can use some of the money for project delivery, such as project planning, procurement and financial management of the project, up to 10%. And then the last one's around tracks, roads and car parks. Again, it's something that we will fund, but you need to be able to demonstrate that there is a clear need for, either a new road or an enhanced road to help people access the site. And also need to take into account things like, have you looked at whether people can reach the site on foot or by bike, or whether there's public transport that can be used instead. So those are the sort of things you need to think about. And also, ideally, if we are going to be funding a road or a car park, you've thought about other stuff that could be done to enhance the project as well. Okay. I am still on, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't look quite, the screen didn't look quite right. Okay, so revenue items. So as I say, there is a small amount of revenue available. You can claim up to 10% of the total project costs for helping to sort of really to engage people in the project. So it could be to involve a wide array of people in events to promote the woodlands, to the local community and to celebrate achievements, etc. Training and support for people and for volunteers. And then the last one, there could be some money for specialist advice and consultancy services. So as part of the application process, we do expect a management plan to come in with the application, but it may be that you need help, to develop a longer term management plan, which will also help you to show that you could be a national forest site in the future. So maybe as part of your work this year, as you're enhancing the woodlands, you could also ask for some funding to help you to develop sort of longer term management plans as well. So there is that opportunity there if needed. And then just in terms, finally, there's the ineligible items. I'd urge you to look at the guidance for this because it's quite a long list. I've put some of the key ones in the presentation, but really look at the guidance for this. But things like purchase of land where it's more than 10% of the project. We're not paying for buildings, and we're not buying vehicles. As I said earlier, we're not paying for medium or large scale machinery and equipment through this scheme. So it's things like that, but definitely familiarise yourself with the guidance on this particular item. So as I've said already, timing is tight, so we'd expect permissions and consents largely to be in place already or really in train. But if you have got a project and you haven't got them in place already and you think you might be able to, if you think you might need planning permission or environmental impact assessments, then please speak to Natural Resources Wales or your local authority or other agency that's involved in the sort of licensing of that work, as consent may be required. There's also other things just to think about when you're planning a new woodland or enhancement work. Just make sure you're not breaking any bylaws or obstructing any rights of way, and you may need to speak to your rights of way officer in your area and don't do anything which could obviously damage the environment or cause pollution. So if you're doing some work around removing invasive species, for example, just make sure you use some qualified people to do the work. Okay, and then the last slide. So as I mentioned earlier, it's available via RPW online, and there's the website there. Please, would you familiarise yourself with the guidance document and how to complete document before starting the application? We have already had 1 or 2 applications come in where they haven't done that, and we may need to reject them because of that. So please read it carefully. This was just meant to give you a flavour of the kind of things that we'll be funding this year. And then for inquiries, please contact RPW Customer Contact Centre, or you can contact us in the National Forest team. The only other thing I was just going to suggest in terms of next steps, I think Erica sort of alluded to it earlier, and it's mentioned in the guidance, but this is all about woodlands that have the potential to become part of the National Forest. And later in the year, we are looking to launch another scheme, which will give people the opportunity to come forwards and say, my woodland is National Forest standard, or we believe it's National Forest status already. Please, can we become National Forest? So there'll be a rolling window for there. So if you're not, it won't necessarily be for these projects coming through TWIG this year, but it'll be a rolling window. It'll be an open scheme. So as and when woodlands become what we consider to be National Forest, then you can apply for the badge, for the branding, to become part of the network. To give a sense of what we mean, and as Erica mentioned, we are doing some work around what do we mean by the outcomes, but there is in the guidance document, Annex 1, it does start to sort of flesh out a bit about what the sort of things we'll be looking for in terms of the 6 outcomes. So make sure you have a look at Annex 1 in particular. But I think that's all for me for now. So I think we're happy to take questions. So I will stop sharing the screen if I can. Does that stop sharing? Anyone? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, have we got questions?
We've got lots of questions.
We have got lots of
We have got lots of questions. I think Laura and Anne have been busy answering some of them. So thank you to Laura and Anne who have been posting in the Q&A.
Do you want me to kind of go through the top ones that have come up, Erica?
Fabulous, Laura. If you could pick out some of the more pertinent ones, that would be lovely that we can answer.
So there's been a couple on whether, if you have TWIG funding, can you in future years apply for more grant funding or receive payments from other sources such as private investments for ecosystem services or natural capital payments?
As long as there's no duplication of funding, it's not for the same thing, and we're working to National Forest outcomes, that is absolutely fine. We totally envisage a blended funding model for this. So, yep, that's absolutely, as long as there's no duplication of funding for the same thing.
There's also been some concerns with the timescales and how short the window is for getting the work done by March for EIA approvals, etc.
Yeah, shall I? Yeah, I mean, as I covered in my presentation, we acknowledge that timescales are really short, and if there is a new project that does require environmental impact assessments and possibly planning permission, then it may be that there isn't sufficient time to apply for TWIG this round, but we would hope that there would be further versions of TWIG in the future. So if people can start developing those projects, and it's not guaranteed, but we would assume there would be other versions of National Forest schemes that people could apply to in the future. But yeah, we completely appreciate that timescales are not ideal. This is a pilot, it's a demonstrator, and we just want to see what the kind of projects are already, and it is largely going to have to be ready to go projects or projects that don't require permissions this year. So we do definitely acknowledge that point, and it is a good point.
Did you say that the fund will only support public woodlands or those that will become public woodlands?
Yes, good question. To be part of the National Forest, you will need to be a publicly accessible woodland. We have had questions asking whether initially it needs to be publicly accessible whilst you're doing work. Maybe you're planting trees or you're sort of cording some areas off so that flowers can flourish or nature can recover. So I think we're saying initially it may not have to be accessible whilst you're doing the work, but there needs to be a plan that says in the future it will be publicly accessible, it's being designed, and communities will be involved in the development of the site and potentially help with the work. So it would definitely need to be part of the plan for the future. We need to see evidence in the future it would be available to the public to use. That's right, Erica. Anything to add, Erica? Was that?
No, absolutely. It's that's one of the essential essential outcomes, and it's what makes it different to everything else. It's not a funding scheme per se, it's working towards a national forest. So that is one thing I think we need to just kind of emphasize. This is part of a whole bigger strategy. It is funding for woodland enhancement and woodland creation, but it's not a one-off, and it is part of a bigger thing. So you are becoming part of a network of national forests. So and that comes with its own unique USP, if you like, which makes it different to the other woodland creation funding schemes such as Glacier and other things that we fund. So that's just making you aware of the differences with this funding. It isn't just an income stream to do X, Y, and Z. It's actually to look forward and to become part of a bigger thing. So I hope that helps a bit.
Would TWIG be eligible for urban planting, which including funding for tree pits and infrastructure, implementation of pastoral woodland, and implementing scattered tree planting in existing grazing land?
Again, it's outcomes based. If it meets the outcomes, then yeah, the answer is yes. We need, this is absolutely site specific and place based approach to woodland creation. So the projects will come in and they will be assessed on their own merits. So until we see the package, if you like, we can't answer that per se. But those outcomes are what govern what fits and what doesn't. So if it's fitting those outcomes, then yes, but we would need to assess that against the scoring criteria.
And are the application questions available without logging on to RPW online?
I don't know. It's a good question.
If it's just a PDF of the questions, I think we can get that.
We
but
probably
all the
could make it
applications
available.
go through the portal. So all formal applications need to go through that portal to be registered, and then obviously go through the system. So I think we should be able to download a PDF of the questions, or individuals should be able to do that. We can ask RPW for you.
Yeah, we can. I mean, certainly we've worked with RPW to try and create quite a streamlined form, so it shouldn't be too onerous. But largely, it's going to be asking questions around how will you demonstrate the outcomes of the National Forest. It's largely framed around that, and some of the cross-cutting themes for the National Forest around how you might contribute to climate change adaptation, mitigation, and tourism, and that sort of thing as well. If relevant, it might not be relevant for all the projects, but yeah, we can see if we can make that available.
Okay. Is the scheme open to groups that currently have a management agreement for NRW Woodland?
Yes, it all depends on the lease arrangements with NRW and the management agreement. So we'd have to look at the constituted groups. So again, it's if you could email in, if that's a particular question to a particular site, if you could email the National Forest inbox, we can have a look at that in a bit more detail. Because again, it's site specific, so we just need to understand the parameters on that one.
Given the timeline, have you streamlined the process for application, and how time consuming is the process for the applicant?
We have, yeah, as I've mentioned, we have streamlined the process. We're using a new form that RPW have developed, which combines an EOI process within the full application. So from the customer point of view, it's one form to fill in, but for us, there's sort of like a two-stage approach. I mean, we've not filled in ourselves. I mean, there is a certain amount of evidence that needs to be provided to apply for a government grant. But I mean, we did have an application come in within less than a day of the scheme going live, so it is possible to do it fairly quickly. But there is a certain amount of evidence we'll need to be able to award the grant, and there's accompanying documents that will need to be provided, which are set out in the guidance document. But we need to see things like management plan and other things that are required. So hopefully it's not too onerous, but there was a certain amount of information we need.
Okay. Will Cadw and the Welsh Archaeological Trusts be consulted, as they are with Glacier Woodland Creation?
Yeah, I mean, if it was in an area where they needed to be consulted, then yes, they would need to be. People need to look at the woodland opportunities map, and that'll help them to know, who the people they need to consult. And if the case of is there something they need to consult, then there may not be time this time to go for TWIG. There may be the one that has to be for a later round, but yeah, they would need to be consulted.
In terms of accessibility, is improving paths and providing facilities like new toilets or disabled toilets appropriate?
We have allowed for compostable toilets as part of the scheme, and we certainly expecting people to put in applications where they're enhancing existing footpaths, because timing's quite tight anyway. Then that's the sort of thing we're probably going to see more of this year, is around enhancing existing infrastructure. So yes, both of those are allowed. Ideally, we would like to see that, if we're paying for a toilet, then ideally we'd like to see other work as part of that as well. So maybe they do some work around enhancing the actual woodland itself and putting in, and maybe as well as enhancing the footpath, putting in a nature trail for kids or more signage. So not just applying for a path or for a toilet, but all the other stuff around it to enhance, public and community involvement in the woodland.
Can the funding be spent towards employment for extra help?
Yes. If people need to buy in labour and expertise, then they can use the funding for that.
But only up to 10% of the project costs, because that's a revenue cost, isn't it? So it needs to come under the revenue rules. So I'd advise everybody to look under the guidance for the revenue elements. But it can come under, it can, if it's directly involved in delivering the project.
I'm just trying to pick out some more now. Is this project funded via the Rural Development Programme?
Nope. No, it's National Forest funding.
And are local authorities eligible to apply?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, we had a chat with Ben Sears from the Welsh Local Government Association yesterday, and he's going to be helping us to engage local authorities. Yes, so definitely local authorities are eligible to apply.
Can the funding be used for felling of diseased trees on public owned land and used for replanting?
It can, but it's not an ash. I mean, for example, it's not an ash dieback scheme. It's more for where trees are sort of posing a threat to people's safety and health and safety and stuff. So we wouldn't expect to see a project that was entirely sort of dealing with ash dieback. But if it's a small part of a larger project, then potentially the funding could be used to support that work.
Also, for everyone on the call, Lucy has just posted the questions, the link to the questions on the guidance, where you don't have to have an RPW account.
Fabulous.
Thanks,
Thank
Lucy.
you. Thank you, Lucy. There it is. There's the web link there. So for everybody to have a look.
There's quite a few more questions coming in. I don't know whether you've picked up any or...
There is.
So I know I've not been looking actually, Laura.
I know it's quite hard to follow.
Well done, Laura. You're doing a brilliant job there. There's a lot of questions about sort of speculative projects coming in that won't have been developed. The thing is, if a project comes in and it's won't be ready to deliver this year, it won't be able to go through, unfortunately. So what we're really interested in is creating that pipeline and people to start thinking about projects so they are ready for when a funding round comes out and available. So please don't be put off that you can't fit this window. This is the first one. This is a pilot of this scheme. So yeah, it's not, it's not sort of here today. God, we're literally trialing something. So please don't put those projects back on the shelf. Keep working them up. Keep thinking about it and prepare them for a new round. And we'll take the learning from this round and apply it to any future funding. Then that's the whole idea of this. So yeah, a speculative application coming in that won't deliver in this time frame, unfortunately, won't be able to go through. So there'll be a lot of effort going into something. I just want to kind of help people and sort of manage expectations there. But please keep working on them and get them ready to go when the next round comes through.
So I have excuse me, it's Anne. I have a question that's come in. Do you need a CRN number to apply?
That's an RPW need, isn't it?
Yes.
We will need to check on that, but
Yeah.
I think it's the way that the system works.
You probably do from memory.
I think we need to just look at the guidance, but I'm
It's
pretty sure it's the way the system works, and you have to log into the system with a CRN number. So we'll check that out for you.
I don't think I've got the right guidance document in front of me at the moment. I think it's probably the how to complete guide. It tells you what you need. I think the answer is probably yes.
Okay, and another question, do you envisage multi-user access to the National Forest as it develops, or are you only aiming for public pedestrian access?
We're looking at all different variations of that. The longer term strategy for the National Forest, one thing we haven't mentioned today, is there will be a consultation later in this year on that long term strategy. And the actual sort of organisational principles of the National Forest. So all of that will be covered in the consultation. So things like multi-user access, as you say, so mountain bikes or bikers, horse riders, walkers, runners, mobility needs, that type of issue will be covered in the consultation, which will be coming out sort of, like I say, later in the year. So watch this space for that one, because it will start shaping what the National Forest is long term. And when we say long term, we say very long term. So yeah, it's part of a bigger thing. So any testing we can do with this funding would be absolutely brilliant. If there's ways we can test that and people have ideas on how we can do that, that would be fabulous.
There's a question in the about community involvement in woodlands. It's a really good question. It's something that we are giving more thought to at the moment, and we haven't completely bottomed out. But I think at the moment, for the purposes of this scheme, we're sort of saying community involvement is, as a minimum, you at least try and talk to the people in the local area to get an idea of how they would like the enhancement of the woodland to work, or a woodland creation project to go forwards. Ideally, that would be the minimum, and it may be that in some areas the communities don't engage with you, but at least you've reached out to them. But ideally, that would then be a spectrum of different levels of involvement, potentially all the way up to the woodland being taken on by the local community to manage. But there's also all the different levels in between that. So it could be that you maybe get a school group comes around every so often, or you get a community group set up for your particular woodland. But there's something we're giving some thought to at the moment. But we just need to see some evidence that some effort's being made or will be made. And it may be for this scheme you haven't done the community involvement yet, but as long as there's a plan that says we're going to use some of this funding to start engaging the communities or trying to engage communities in the project, and that's I think what we're looking for.
That's super. I think there's a question there from Chris Engel. We have a lot of young, early, mature woodland areas that involve numerous community groups and already deliver a number of the outcomes desired. How do I get these assessed to see if they meet the standards expected? That question is a super question, and it will be, as James mentioned in his presentation, the status scheme that's coming along after this scheme, which will be how you actually then apply for your woodlands to then become National Forest status. So watch this space on that one, because that is exactly the type, if you've already feel that your woodlands against those outcomes, there will be more information on that later. We're just working through the exact needs of that, and the way that scheme can actually apply to all woodlands. So we need to make it flexible so it does apply to every scenario. So it's not an easy task, but I think once we've got something that fits and we're able to flex it to all the different types of from a small community woodland in Swansea through to big sort of commercial enterprises that do have public access and that do have recreational access and things like that. So we're just working through how that all fits, but that's coming later in the year again. So yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, There's lots of questions. Thank you for everybody for giving up your time this morning. This is really good.
There is a question on here from a few people asking what a CRN number is and how, if we need those, how do they go about getting one?
As I say, that's an RPW process system need. We will check with RPW, but I'm pretty sure everybody has to have one. It's part of that going through the process.
There is a how to complete guide. So as well as the actual guidance document which accompanies the scheme, there is actually an RPW how to complete guide, and I think it's all in there what you need to be able to complete the application. I haven't got it in front of me at the moment. I don't know if any of the team can quickly try and pull it up on their screen, but it'll
maybe post the link. If somebody could post the link to the how-to guide, that'd be really useful. CRN is client reference number. And it's basically your unique identifier on the system. So it's like anything, if you buy something online or whatever, you end up with a personal client reference number, and that's what they use to identify your application. So as it's going through RPW, the answer is yes, you do need one. How you get one, I'm not 100% sure. So it will be in that guide. So if somebody could post that, that would be really handy.
And is there guidance in terms of which species to plant, e.g. native species, climate change resilient species, etc.?
It's right tree, right place. Obviously it's UKFS, and it needs to be suitable for the site and for what you're doing. And obviously it will be part of your woodland plan. So we don't go down to species level at all. As I say, it's site specific and it's place based. So yeah, there's resilience needs. There's also needs for more productive forestry and what that needs, and carbon, and all sorts of different reasons why you plant different species in different places, down to the soil type and all sorts of things. So yeah, absolutely site based, and it needs to be right tree, right place. So yeah, we can't give you that sort of prescription.
I've just posted the link at the bottom.
Oh, thanks, Laura.
How to use RPW online.
As I say, some of the questions are relating to the funding available for sort of restocking or replanting trails and things like that. That again, the outcomes are dictating what the funding is for. So if it's going to be a part of the National Forest longer term, then the answer is kind of yes. If it's just to do something that's to repair or to restock as a one-off sort of event, then it probably won't go through. This is the difference. It's not just for all woodland per se. It's for creating national forests. So that's the bit of the difference with the funding.
There is a question around access and whether it's permissive or open access, and I think it's partly for you to sort of come to us. I mean, in the guidance, I think we do talk about it could be open access or it could be permissive access. Ideally, if you're going to be part of the National Forest Network, we want that sort of long-term asset. So we're suggesting that you need to be prepared to sort of sign up for having access open for at least 20 years. So if that's not something that people are keen to do, then it's potentially not going to be a National Forest woodland, but we need that sort of long-term asset and availability. So that's what we suggest in the guidance for now. But yeah, it's really up to you to decide whether it's open or permissive. Any others? There's a question around what proportion of the Welsh Government woodland estate is accessible to the public. As far as I'm aware, pretty much all of it. Yeah, I think most of it's available. There may be bits that are cordoned off from time to time if they're doing work to the site, stuff, harvesting timber and stuff. Otherwise, I think it's largely available.
Oh, I'm just having a flick through. Is there Anne and Laura? Is there any other?
When do you envisage the next round opening?
Oh, that's a good question. If we knew, we would have put it on the end of the slideshow. No, we absolutely. Once we know, we will let everybody know. But it will be next year sometime. If we're on 1 year funding, so we have to just, we're in this round at the moment, but we will let everybody know as soon as we know. So sorry about that. We can't give you a can't give you an indicative timeline on that one.
And could things like urban tree mapping or identifying tree planting opportunities be applied for?
Again, we're looking at the woodland creation and the enhancement at the moment. So it's actual projects that could go forward this year and claim the money this year. So we're looking at actual sites at the moment. So that urban tree mapping, identifying, etc. I think there was another question about the local authorities have been asked to look at woodland planting opportunities from the deep dive that's just happened. Obviously, all of that information and evidence comes into the National Forest and actually comes in and informs where the trees can go and what is likely to be National Forest. There'll be some areas of land that just can't be National Forest. They'll be on a really sloped ground, or they'll be inaccessible, or they'll be purely production forestry. You know, there'll be some areas that won't be National Forest. Not everything is National Forest. So we need to be clear on that. We're looking at those outcomes that make the National Forest, so the connectivity, the people, the learning, and all of those things. So any mapping that's being done on an urban level, any mapping that's being done on a local authority level, all of that will all feed into the National Forest intelligence and evidence bank, if you like, along with the Woodland Opportunities Map and the organisational principles, which will be in the consultation, and then we can start seeing where this is actually going to start being created and join up. So it's a bit like joining the dots with trees at the moment. So we're starting with those 14 exemplar sites. They were chosen because they are the exemplars, as I say. It might look like there's some areas of Wales that aren't covered, but this is because there's certain sites in certain areas that the time we were in was COVID was just opening up after the first lockdown, I think, and the footfall in some places was incredible. So we just had to manage footfall, etc. But there's no reason why we can't have others added to that map on the existing Welsh Government woodland estate, and that's what we're looking to do. And then all of the ones that are coming through the status scheme, ones that come through the community woodland scheme, which I think Laura's put the link on, or Lucy's put the link on for the community woodland scheme as well. We have the tiny forests, we have a lot of other activity going on, which will start building that map up, but it is place-based. It is informed by your area statements and your local nature partnerships and the community need, and it is kind of the connectivity will happen as you start seeing all these projects come to life. So yeah, it's a long-term thing. And it's not as prescriptive because it needs to be flexible for all woodland scenarios. So and habitat as well. So I think there's a question in there about I think it's from Glenda about habitat as well, and how we connect habitat with the wooded areas, etc. So all of that needs to be taken into account.
There's a really good question I've just spotted about the fact that it's 1 year funding, and how do we take into account the fact that trees take, you know, years of management to establish. And it's a really good point. I mean, as we've mentioned, we are limited with 1 year funding at the moment. So as part of this application, we will need to see in a management plan that there is plans to maintain the trees beyond the first year of funding. I mean, there is a chance as we move forward with the National Forest, we might be able to move to a position where we do get multi-year funding awards, but we're not there yet at the moment. But if there's potentially would be a possibility for you to bid in again next year if you need some additional funding. But at the moment, we're just having to rely on 1 year funding, and then the management plan suggesting that you have plans in place to keep those trees, you know, sustained, to look after them. It's just where we are at the moment.
There's another one in here saying, can you confirm if using the grant to fund land purchase, did you say this could only be used to fund 10% of the purchase cost?
Yeah, up to 10, maximum up to 10% of the project cost. It
isn't a land purchase scheme, but if they're, and again, it's down to the project, so it's site specific and the obviously the scenario. So we would need to look at it on a case by case basis, but it's not a land acquisition scheme per se. So I did see another question about management plans. I'm aware there's a certain amount of money paid per management plan for Glastier. Under this scheme, it's all actual costs, and if we are funding, it would need to be, obviously the market would need to be tested, and it would need to be value for money grounds that we pay for management plans. There isn't a standard rate on this scheme, although it would be in line with we wouldn't expect to be any different, sort of in the same ballpark as Glasstier. So we just need to be mindful of that. It's not paid for in the same way as Glasstier. This is an actual cost, so it's reimbursing costs incurred. So sorry to get techie, but it's a different type of way of payment.
And in future years, will there be a higher ratio of revenue to capital? There's a few in here about
It's a good
paid
question.
coordination.
It's a good question. We have only a little bit of revenue at the minute and capital. Obviously, revenue is essential to spend the capital. We totally understand that. So yeah, we're looking for ways of doing that in different ways. So unfortunately, we've got the limits we've got this year, but we'll try. I totally understand that question.
I have another question. I think this has sort of been answered in various sort of guises, but could this year's funding be used for planning of delivery and all the elements required to line things up? This then return with proposal for implementation next year?
No, I think we're saying that ideally you would come with a plan this year for work that you want to undertake this coming season, planting season, but you could apply for some revenue funding to develop a longer term plan as part of it at the same time as doing some work this year. So we wouldn't want to just see bids for plans, but you could put some bid in to develop a longer term plan for the future, but we'd need to see an initial plan that comes in with work this year.
And does the full area planted need to be accessible?
No, I don't think so. I mean, as long as some of it's accessible, because it may be that some areas you need to be fenced off for various reasons, you know, to help trees grow or for biodiversity purposes. So as long as some of it is, we haven't put a percentage on this or anything, but as long as some of it's accessible to the public and it's clear the bits that are accessible and the bits that aren't accessible, then that's fine. That should be fine.
And we're not just looking at a straight through route.
No.
This is about people. So
Yeah.
we're not looking at a straight through route from A to B straight across a piece of woodland. It's about people engaging with nature and people engaging with the woodland. So as James said earlier, you know, you could have nature trails and different areas. There will be some need maybe to fence an area off for natural regeneration, or there's some work going on, or you know, restocking or replanting has happened in an area, but not there. That's absolutely fine, but we wouldn't just expect it to be a footpath through a wood that's totally fenced off. You know, there has to be
just a tiny corner of it. Yeah.
So it's all part of the whole sort of offer, really. As I say, the National Forest is it's really hard to James explained it really well. It's an experience, and it's people. You did explain it really well the other day. It's an experience, and it's people go there for a reason, and whether it be well-being or health or to visit, and it's an experience that they want to remember. And most of the memories that we've had posted, we have a people's collection, so people can post their memories of trees in Wales, and most of those memories are actually experiences. They don't remember the site specifically, but they remember what they were doing, and they remember, you know, I climbed a tree with my brothers and sisters and we ate our sandwiches in the tree or something. It's that type of thing. So it's all about that, and it's people engaging back with nature and having some time out. So I'm aware now I think we've got 5 minutes to go. So any last questions, please can you post them in the chat bar?
If we don't get to any questions as part of this session, because it looks like we've got over 100 questions at the moment in the chat bar, then feel free to email the National Forest email address that we mentioned earlier, and we can perhaps post it again if we haven't posted it in the chat bar. But yeah, if we don't get to your question, then please contact us if it's something that will help for us to answer.
I've got one in here that came in a couple of minutes ago. Would funding be considered for infrastructure to protect areas of natural regeneration, for example, adjacent to existing ancient woodland sites?
I guess it depends what we mean by infrastructure, but I mean certainly fencing and stuff we've said could be included as part of the funding. But Do you know what other infrastructure might be, Erica?
No, I mean that fencing, and
yes.
pest control and things like that. But yeah, again, it's outcomes based. So please look at the outcomes and make sure that kind of fits with the National Forest overall objectives, really. Again, if the ancient woodland is one of those sort of exemplar sites, then this would only enhance it. So it's all about the total offer, not just the activity that's happening. So please, in applications, make sure the whole thing is explained, the whole project, not just the bit that you're relating the funding to, because otherwise it's seen in isolation. It's not seen as the bigger picture. So we can only score what's on the paper. So if it's not on the paper, it won't get, you know, and don't. The only thing is, having done applications myself, don't presume that there's a certain level of knowledge on a certain site, because you don't know who's going to be scoring the application. So it might seem a little bit irrelevant to you as you're writing it, but please put it down. We have put word counts on some of it, I have to say, just to save people having to write essays. But please, if it's pertinent to the whole site and it forms a part of a bigger picture, please put it in.
Yeah, the bigger picture point's interesting as well, because as well as the site, you know, if you can demonstrate how you're thinking about how it connects to other woodlands nearby, whether that's through trees and plants or through footpaths or whatever, then that will also help with the application as well, so that we start to develop our national forest network across Wales, because it's not just about thinking about your individual woodland in isolation, but it's also how does that contribute to the whole of the national forest going forwards as well. So that's another important, and connected woodlands is a highly desirable outcome, so we don't want to see it everywhere, but at least if you could show that you've thought about it and how it connects to other woodlands, you know, to help biodiversity and for people, then that would be great.
Anne has posted both the English and Welsh versions of the National Forest email address. If people want to quickly note that down now before the call ends, that's on there.
And Glenda, I noticed that you've said we haven't answered your questions, and Glenda very kindly was part of our webinar last year with farmers on the National Forest, and apologies for not reaching your question, but we'll certainly answer it you know, after the event, as all the questions will be on a document and sent out.
Yeah, and we've got well over 100 questions now. I'm not sure how many of them we've answered, but we've tried to get around as many as we can, and I think we're pretty much out of time now, aren't we, unless there's any last minute things.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to just turn my camera off now and hand over to Anne. Thank you to everybody for their time.
Ie, jyst eisiau dweud diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd am ymuno â ni heddiw. Mae'r sesiwn hon wedi recordio, fel dwi wedi dweud yn y chatba, a bydd ar gael yn fuan. Bydd y link yn cael ei anfon atoch chi gyd a phawb a gafodd y gwahoddiad gwreiddiol. Os oes gennych chi unrhyw cwestiynau mwy pellach, cysylltwch â ni Coedwig Genedlaethol Cymru @llyw.cymru. Thank you all so much for joining us today. The session has been recorded. We've had some great questions, and thank you to James and Erica for answering them all. The link will be available, and we'll send it to you with the original invite. So please contact us at nationalforest@gov.wales if you have any further questions. A jyst eisiau dweud diolch yn fawr iawn unwaith eto. Thank you very much.